well can give you a whole lot of information, as can resistivity ones, because of course you're dealing with water, okay, and so resistivity and electromagnetic surveys are going to tell you whether there's water there, what the quality of the water is like, what the porosity is like, etc., etc., etc. So geophysics is something you can do. Like I say, it's not something that's widely used around New Zealand for looking for groundwater, but it's something you may engage in sometime or not. Okay, here's the really big boring bit, the long boring bit. Reporting, tenders and contracts. And again, I guess that's something you guys never get any experience of in this. The engineers do that, a whole paper on it, so they're quite prepared when they come out and work. For some reason, people don't seem to think they're professionals and they teach you this stuff, but tenders and contracts and reports and things are a vital part of hopefully what will become your job in the future. Okay, you don't just spend all day out in the field mapping and digging holes. You hardly ever do that. And the longer you're in the job, the more you end up doing this stuff, because they pay you lots of money to do it, and they want your experience, your expertise. So you prepare a report of all your findings, right, for the client, all that stuff you've just done, I've just talked about. Write a nice report. It's got to be in English. It has things called paragraphs and sentences and full stops and punctuation and headings. Pictures. Yeah, they're pretty nice documents, these things, okay, they're professionally done. It's another one of the reasons why we try and get you to do some sort of writing and coherent writing anyway, through your degree. Unfortunately, we don't have as much time as we used to. But anyway, you'll make recommendations, say yes, we think this is good, or no, we don't. You're going to tell them the truth either way, okay? And it's based on your investigations so far and the client's requirements that they've already given to you. You've got all that in there. And then we'll give them the report, you'll give them like a week or two, actually as long as they want, they're going to be paying you, to make a decision whether you proceed with the project. Hopefully they say yes, they've got enough confidence in you to at least believe in your findings, and if they say yes, good. If no, of course you expand it, go on to the next client, next job, on to the next commission. If they say yes, it's all good, then you have to put together a tender for contractors. You don't just look through the phone book and ring up the nearest driller and say, hey, can you come in and do a groundwater investigation for us? Because God knows what you'll get. So you prepare tender documents. These are a really comprehensive set of documents. Tenders are, like for these big projects like this, the tender documents are like 2 or 3 centimetres thick. They're just full of information. They've got everything the tenderer may need to know about the job, every single thing about it. You've got to make people as well informed as possible when they're tendering for these things, because of course they've got to use that to give you a price. And if you haven't got this complete, your prices are complete, when it comes to actually doing the job, things, boy, yeah, I hate to have to work under those circumstances, but if you do it properly, it all works out really well. So the full scope of the projected works as well, things they're going to do, need to be sure everything's included and try and foresee all contingencies. You even write contingencies into these things and cost of them in as well, okay, just to make sure. And they're important for many reasons. One of them, they'll become a part of the contract. When the contract's awarded, and the contract is the legal documents under which this project will be governed. They're very important, okay, and so you need to be aware of that as well. As the tenderer sends tenders in, the engineer of the contract, i.e. the firm that's doing the work, will evaluate the tenders as per the client's requirements. Generally, the requirement will want the lowest price conforming tender, i.e. the person that could do the full job, the correct specifications for the least amount of money. In theory that's really good, in practice it's really not. There are some people that just are a mission to deal with, and they also lie when they tender. There are some companies that we will just refuse to use after the first time because they're so dodgy, awful. But you've got to try and convince the client of that. They'll have other political agendas sometimes as well. They want to use locals, and the consultants often won't want to use locals. They'll have people they know are really good at the job, are reliable, and give good, really good quality work for a reasonable amount of money. But anyway, once you've evaluated the tenders, you'll recommend the contract to the client. You'll award the contract, prepare the contract documents, and administer the contract, hopefully until the job's finished. Okay, the contract being the legal documents by which the project will be governed. So that's the process. The first thing you've got to do is put this damn tender together, and it can be fun, I guess, but it can be awfully tedious as well, because it's got to be really comprehensive. You've really got to have in-depth knowledge of the project, which is why a junior person going into a company might end up doing this kind of thing. If you ever get a chance to, when you're on projects and you get a chance to do this kind of stuff, get involved with it. It'll do you really well in the long run. Okay? Give you a really good understanding of how an entire project runs, not just the piece you're often involved in. The other thing is that I'm talking about projects from start to finish, and I was lucky enough to be involved in projects from start to finish. Okay? When you start off in the company, you're just doing one little bit, they'll see you get a bit of drilling, nothing else, or else you'll be just sitting in the office doing the desktop study. You won't see everything all the way through from start to finish. So you get a chance when you're working to get involved in different aspects of the job. Do it. Okay? It's well worth it. It'll get you out there much more quickly. So anyway, tender. Okay, the thing we're using. An offer of money or service and payment of an obligation, a written offer to contract goods or services at a specified cost or rate. So B is what we are using the tender for, or we tender for. We put that offer out there, people are going to give us a price, and we're going to evaluate it and see what happens. It's supposed to provide the client the best chance to get value for money, okay, for a job. Okay, hopefully it does. And like I say, generally the client will want lowest price conforming, but sometimes it's not always good. Sometimes you get experience, and it costs a bit more, but it's worth it in the long run. The job is shorter, and you don't get cost overruns. So they'll still look at the cost. You're not going to get the most gold-plated tender and just take that because they're going to use this, that, and everything else. But you've got to evaluate it tender fairly and by going by the guidelines of the client. It also gives the contractors a fair chance to bid for a project, knowing all the conditions likely to be present. So they are trusting that you've given them all the information available. They can go get more of their own, and they often should. They should do due diligence on their own, but the tender that you're giving out to the clients, okay, is the same for all of them. They all get the same information. Any new info comes along, they all get it. If one requests more info from you or the client will you give it to them and everyone else. Okay, there's no secrets in these dealings. It's all open, it's all above board. Each individual tenderer has the same information. They can go and get their own, which they don't have to share with other people. But if anything is given by the client or the engineer to them, when they've requested, it's got to go to everybody. Okay? That's an open process. That's really important. It's fair. Okay? That's how it should be. It's a legal process, and it's a fair and open process. You can't weigh the tender more than one person to the other. Okay? So you might as well just go and give them the job and forget the tender process, because it's a really expensive process. It adds a lot of money and client fees and all sorts of things like that. Like I say, they're free to get that information from the client or elsewhere. If it comes from the client, it'll be shared. If not, then they can keep it. And a lot of contractors that are experienced and been in it for a long time will have a lot of information of their own. They'll have worked in these places before, so they will have a bit of a competitive advantage over other people. That's good, and they're allowed. And that's what you're doing, that's what you're trying to get. Okay? And if they put that in their tender for you, then you can get an idea, okay, maybe we don't want the lowest price conforming, maybe these guys have more experience, and we can use them. It's a very rigorous process, fairly administered, and all of the conditions are laid out in documents, which are hideously boring to read. Okay, there's all sorts of legalese in them, and there's descriptions, and there's specs, and there's blah, blah, blah. But, like I say, it's a part of the process, and if you get involved in it, it can be reasonably rewarding. Once the tender is accepted by the client, it's legally binding. It becomes part of the contract, and that's it. And everyone signs things, and if anything goes nasty, it all goes to court. Okay, so again, you've got to be careful with this process. It's not just something you do on the back of an old cigarette pack and then chuck out there. So, and it will constitute a significant portion of the final contract. If the tender documents are about, I don't know, 2 centimetres, the final contract's about 5 centimetres. So these things are horrendous, especially if you carry them around with you. If issues arise during the process that result in changes to the tender, and that happens sometimes, okay? Someone will be scoping it out and they'll realise, well, hang on, this is impossible what you're asking us to do, no one can do this. And they'll ask for changes. If there are changes again, they apply to everybody. They go out to everyone. It's fair, like I say, everyone gets kept informed. And if there are any changes, they'll actually be officially written into the contract documents once they're prepared. So the original tender goes in, but there's a whole lot of changes that will go in there as well. So as I said before, it's really important that the people administering the tender are really familiar with the job. Okay, so they won't have just done one aspect of the project, they'll be familiar with all aspects of the project, everything from well design and groundwater testing and groundwater modelling and all sorts of things. Okay, they'll have a go at pretty much all of it. Yeah, communication is really important, that's what it says, because Like I say, once everything's been accepted and signed, you can't change anything unless everyone agrees. Okay? Changes do happen, okay, even after contracts have been formalised and things. Okay? Changes happen, it's just inevitable, especially when you're dealing with unknowns like groundwater, like subsurface conditions. It does happen, but just be aware that changes have to be agreed by everyone, the contractor and the client. Often, and of course, you're the middleman, so you need to be a bit diplomatic when you're dealing with these people. Everything must be in it. Anything that they may use, that you expect them to do, deliver. You may be writing contingencies as well, just in case anything goes wrong. Everything's got to be in there. You've got to actually really nut out exactly what you want. It's a really hard process sometimes, especially when you do the first one. Okay, it gets a bit easier afterwards because, of course, these things just repeat themselves. Like I say, you've got to be really familiar with the process. 3 parts to the tender documents: the tendering, the conditions of the contract, the legal guff, and the specifications and drawings, what you want them to do. Okay, so you've got to be really prepared. You've got to know. You can't make this stuff up as you go along. You have to have it all laid out. You have to know exactly what you want them to do, what you want them to provide you, the services, the outcomes, the deliverables, everything before you go to tendering. Okay, it's quite important. You can't go and do it half-assed. It looks really bad. So the tendering, there is a New Zealand standard, as there is for everything, that a lot of people use. It's a construction standard, so when you do a construction standard, but we were building constructions underground, of course, and that was the basis for our tenders and our contracts. So it actually formalises a whole lot of the legalese. You have to write all that. You just say, as per NZS 3910, and this is what, the 2013 version, and that just goes into the contract or the tender documents, and everyone's familiar with that. That goes into all the details of how people are paid and how you administer things and what happens if something goes wrong, and all the legalese stuff. Okay, and the New Zealand government formalised that a long time ago and put it into a New Zealand standard. It also contains instructions to tenderers, all the things that they have to actually do. Any modifications to this, okay, this is a general document, and clients and companies will have their own special versions with their deal. List of information to be submitted with the tender. They've got to give you any subcontractors they'll use. They've got to give you timetables, health and safety plans, CVs, okay, everything. They've got to give you a whole raft of material. Okay? They're trying to get a job. Okay, they're applying for a job, so they've got to give you as much information as possible to convince you that they can do that job and to show you they're organised. Provides a schedule of prices, so basically that we go through and detail everything we want costed up. Okay, every little nut and bolt they're going to use, to the petrol, to the drill rigs, to the man hours, to the actual physical materials, the pipes and the casing and the screens, everything, okay, has to be detailed in there as well, so they can give you a complete price if you have any surprises popping up later on. No tags and or clarifications accepted. Okay, a lot of companies will give you a tender and they'll have weasel words in there saying, okay, this is the price, unless this happens or it doesn't include this, and you send it in and you say, no, fix that up, or you can go away, don't bother tendering. You've got to watch out for that because there are some really dodgy companies around. I could name them, but I won't. So there'll be a table there that they'll complete with all the itemised prices, okay, and there'll be a cost at the bottom, and that's the accepted cost of the contract. When they sign everything up later on, that's the final price, maximum final price that they will be paid. It'll be a maximum because of the contingencies in there which you won't have to pay out for, hopefully. Okay, and it's important they fill it out properly because, as I said, if you're going for the lowest price conforming, you're the tenderer, you want your cost to be the lowest. All those things have to be priced, but you want the number at the bottom of that table to be the lowest number, otherwise you may not get a look in for the job. And the prices can vary a lot, up to 2 times sometimes between different companies, certainly the stuff that we were dealing with anyway. So yeah, when you write these things, you're very specific. You sit and mull over these things for quite a long time because you've got to give them everything that you want them to include in that cost. And this was just to drill a hole, 200 metres. Okay, that's it. And we needed them to price up every single thing that could go wrong in drilling that hole. So drill the hole with that stabiliser, the casing down, include that cost in, include all the cost of the drill bits and all the other things you need, the drilling mud, whatever, getting water there, the whole thing, everything that they need to drill that hole in the ground they've got to consider, because when they write that price in the column, that's the price you'll pay when they've drilled that hole. And if they've taken extra time, extra man hours, extra equipment, unless they can make a really good case for it, they don't get paid. Okay? In this case we were paying them by the metre, so we wanted to work out how much it was going to cost them, divided by 200, and that was the cost per metre they were going to get, because they can claim payment every maybe fortnight or month, they don't finish their hole within a fortnight, they can still claim for what they've done within that fortnight, and so you don't charge that cost the whole job. Some things are items, some things are distances. Everything there, okay? This is another one for conducting certain types of testing. Very specifically tell them exactly what you're going to want them to do, so they can look at it. They say it's going to take X number of hours, X amount of equipment, it's going to cost X $1,000. It's all good. And then they fill in that table. Okay, there's all of the things under various headings. These are all of these are detailed in the 10 documents under these various numbers. Okay, along the lines of all this guff here, and they read through it. Hopefully they can read. Some contractors are really clever, some aren't so. But hopefully they get it right. It's up to them. They'll fill in the table, and down the bottom here will be an amount, and it's the amount that you will pay. You can see a whole lot of things here are provisional, like i.e. they don't go ahead unless conditions are right and they're instructed to do it, okay? Or say you want to drill a bit deeper, okay? And you specify we want to go 200 metres. Let's say you get 200 metres and you think, oh, another 50 metres would be good. The depth is really good, or we haven't quite hit it yet. Okay, it's those sort of contingencies that are built in as well. They're only paid out if they happen, okay? Most of the time, hopefully, they're not necessary. Conditions of contract, all the conditions that will constitute the final contract based on that NZS, let's say 3910 that I talked about before, but it contains all of the legally stuff, okay, that everyone's going to be agreeing to. Contract agreement, which will be signed once everything's finished, all the reference to the above stuff. A whole lot of forms have to be given by the people conducting the project as well. They've got to bond in case anything goes wrong. Okay, so you get money back off them. They've got to have insurance. They've got to fill out producer statements that says, okay, when the job's finished, it will be done. Defects guarantees, all sorts of things like that. Okay, there's a whole lot of legal things that have to be passed backwards and forwards between people as the project goes on. These are all in the conditions of contract. Hold points as well. There'll be points where you have to stop because you've got to get some analyses, for instance, provide those to the client, and they've got to make a decision whether to go on. Right? Now, this can't go on forever. You can't let the contractor hang for 3 months, okay, because it's costing them money to gear on site and all sorts of things. So you specify these hold points in very specific times and specific durations, okay. Again, you have to think carefully about that as well. So you actually got to plan your project out very carefully before you start putting all these sorts of things together. So some of the hold points, for instance, like they've got to deliver you their program within 1 week of accepting the tender. They've got to get you the bond and the plans and things within 2 weeks of accepting the tender. They break these, they can break the contract, okay, so they've got to be aware of all these things as well. And deliverables, okay, apart from the fact, of course, they're giving you a well and things, and a whole lot of other things that go in there as well. Before they start working, for instance, they've got to come up with data safety sheets for all the materials they're using, and manufacturer specifications sheets for the pipes and the screens and all sorts of things like that. These are things they actually have to give you. You need to know what these are, so you can put them in this document, make sure they give them to you. And last of all, the specs and drawings, detailed instructions as to how the works are going to be conducted. So how they're going to drill the hole, how they're going to put the casing in, how they're going to grout it, what materials they are allowed to use or will have to use, what they will be made of. There'll be specifications for all those kinds of things as well. How they can work on the site, okay? How they're going to keep everything tidy and clean. Everything to do with the actual physical works of the project itself, okay? Any drawings you have of the site, any maps of the site, okay? Anything like that will be under the specifications and drawings. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that goes in here. It's a really important part. This is the one that if you are on site looking at the works and doing your site visits, you need to be really familiar with, because these are the kind of things you'll be checking up on when you're out there on the site. So if you don't know what you're doing and what you're on about, you can get yourself in a bit of trouble. Okay. Yeah, so comprehensive as possible, because this is what the tender is used to give their price, and so you don't want to miss anything out. They don't want to miss anything out either. That's yeah, it's a bit of an art writing good specifications, but again, it takes a lot of effort, but it can be quite a rewarding thing. It's a big part of the tender documents. Like I said, it's a part that will be referred to probably mostly through the project, okay, because it's like the instructions for the project itself. And there's just one tiny little section of one tiny little bit of it, okay, how you're going to construct the well. It's proposed that blah, 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 contracts and with this, the production wells should be washed down to a certain depth so they can accommodate a certain size casing, permanently cased to blah, blah, and they'll read through these really carefully, because of course they've got to produce a methodology for you, okay, before they can start the work to go along with their tender, okay, and they need to know exactly what you want from them. And so when they see something like that, they go, okay, these guys know what they're on about. We won't muck them around. We'll A, do a good job, and B, give them a fair price. good. Same sort of thing again, don't read through all those. Those are just tiny excerpts from pages and pages and pages of stuff that you learn as you go along. Okay, finally, once everything's done, you put the contract together. It's a legally binding document, okay, it's the big thick one. It includes everything to do with the contract, so everything I've talked about. All those bits of paper you sent out, you get signed and filled and sent back, go in it. Everything you've asked from them goes in it. Any extra stuff goes in it. Any changes go in it. A copy of the TED documents goes in it. It just goes on and on and on. It's a huge tome of the thing. You know, any letters that have been exchanged, anything, the whole lot, their bond, their insurance certificates, all their CVs. You know, literally, you've got one massive document that comprises the project here, chucked in the back seat of your car somewhere. You can always refer to it when you need to. And it's generally when you're on site. Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I wrote all this down. There you go. Entire document. This is the fun bit. Once it's all together, it can be hundreds of pages. The client and the contractor sit down and read all the way through it, and each of them have to sign every page, the whole thing, so that they say, yes, we understand it, we agree to all this. It's great. Yeah, I just drop it off and say, right, I'll come and pick it up when you've finished. Have fun. It's great. The other thing is with the contract, whenever you're on a job, make sure you've got a copy with you, all right? Because you can always access it and read it, because there'll be things you're wondering about, and you're on site and the driller's doing something, you go, don't know about that, flick through the spec and you go, oh, you're doing it wrong, you can't do that, you've got to move that fence, or you can't pump water onto the farmer's paddock, etc., etc. So it's really important to familiarise yourself with it when you're on a job as well. Even if you're on a tiny job, it'll be a small contract, but still read it. It's not that big a deal, okay? Just be familiar with exactly what it covers. It's really important. Like I say, it's legally binding, right? If anything goes wrong, there are legal ramifications. That's pretty much all there is to it. So there's a completed schedule of prices. See the big number down the bottom here, $387,000. That's to put a hole in the ground and put some casing in it and finish it so that someone later can come along and put a pump in and get water out. It's how much it costs. It's not a cheap exercise, all right? But if you're looking at the lifetime of that being decades and decades and decades, you can see it's quite cost effective if it's done right and if it works. Okay? But they've got to put, like I say, prices to everything that you had in that specification, that schedule of prices. Okay? Some of them will be used, some won't. So this is a maximum cost. Okay? And in this particular job, I think we're doing four wells. So each one became successively cheaper, because you notice here, there's a section here with that putting in observation bores, which would be used when you're pumping the wells to monitor water levels away from the well. We'll talk about those further on. And of course, you don't need those if you're drilling extra wells. And so you see the price went down for each extra well about $60,000 to $70,000. It's still a reasonable amount of money. The client was spending about $1 million on this particular part of the project, and they do lots of these projects all the way up and down the Western Bay of Plenty. Okay, so just quickly, contract management is the thing that goes along with these contracts. There'll be someone in the company that generally is responsible for that, but they will get other people to help out as well. And again, it's something that you can get stuck into. You just do it as another part of your job. Like, you don't do this always, because otherwise you'll probably shoot yourself because it's so boring. But you know, on those rainy days when you can't get out in the field and all those other things, this is when you do these things. But again, the management of the contract is quite important. You'll go do periodic site visits to make sure everything's going all right. They make sure they're doing their job properly. You know, regular contact with the drillers, or who's doing the construction, to make sure everything's happening as well. You need to make sure they're on time. Okay, if there's no lags, make sure they're not disturbing anyone. Make sure they're conforming to the conditions of the contract. Make sure that the whole points occur, but their durations are kept to a minimum, so no one's being held up, because it's not fair on the contractor. Processing a whole lot of certificates. When they want to get paid, they give you a payment certificate. You go through and process it. They request payment, and then you go and fill out this thing called a payment certificate. You send it to the client, they okay it, and it comes back to you, and you go, oh, God's sake, why don't you just pay them? But it's a process that needs to be done, because of course you're making sure that you're paying them what they've done, what they specify in the contract, not overpaying them, they're not getting underpaid, etc., etc., etc. Any variations? Okay, always happen. When you're dealing with the ground, variations always happen. So they'll ring up and they go, oh, we hit this, and we can't do this, and you go, oh, for God's sake. So then you've got to ring up the client and negotiate with them, and they're saying, okay, that's fair, and so you can add a bit of money and issue a variation price request, variation order. There's documentation that runs over these things as well. Folders for these kinds of jobs, you get these big, huge, big, thick file folders, with 5 or 6 of those full of guff once you finally finish one of these damn jobs, and that's not including the modelling stuff. I think that'll do. I think you've all gone to sleep, won't you? Perfect. Yeah, we're up to the next one as well.